This Film is Lit, the podcast where we finally settle the score on one simple question. Is the book really better than the movie? I'm Brian, and I have a film degree, so I watch the movie, but don't read the book.
And I'm Katie. I have an English degree, so I do things the right way and read the book before we watch the movie.
So prepare to be wowed by our expertise and charm as we dissect all of your favorite film adaptations and decide if the silver screen or the written word did it better. So turn it up, settle in, and get ready for spoilers, because this film is lit. And while Cinderella and her prince did live happily ever after, the point, gentlemen, is that they lived. It's ever after, and this film is lit. Hello and welcome back to This Film is Lit, the podcast where we talk about movies that are based on books. It is our March Madness bracket winning episode. In case you weren't paying attention to us on social media, we had a week and a half long, roughly, bracket where we did the top 16? 12
different film
Cinderella adaptations. And then we whittled it down to 2, which was the 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella starring Brandy, and the 1998 Ever After. And Ever After eked out a win. We will be covering the 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella as a bonus episode on Patreon. So if you head over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit, support us there for $5 or more a month. You'll get access to that bonus episode, which will be out towards the end of March, the next couple weeks, something like that. So look out for that. It won't be a full episode like this, but we will discuss it, the differences, what we like about it, all that sort of stuff. If you listen to our bonus episodes, you know what that deal is. But yes, that's what we're doing there. And if not, you should look forward to this Ever After episode, because we got a lot to talk about. So we're going to get right into it with Let Me Sum Up.
Let me explain. No, there is too much. Let me sum up.
I realized after we recorded our prequel episode that we did not talk about what folk tales I would be reading for this.
Oh, yeah, you did not. Yeah.
We didn't talk about it. But I did read 2 different versions to prepare for this episode. I read Perrault, which was always my plan because I feel like that's the more obvious inspiration. Most Cinderella adaptations are based on or inspired by Perrault. But I also decided to go ahead and read the Grimm's version, just in case this pulled anything from it.
Which would make sense given the frame story of this film, which we will discuss.
So I'm going to attempt to sum up both of these at the same time, since they're pretty similar.
Fantastic.
So here we go. Cinderella's mother has died, and if you're in Germany, she plants a tree and waters it with her tears. Her father remarries a woman with 2 daughters. Shortly after the wedding, the stepmother and stepsisters reveal themselves as wicked, and Cinderella is forced to become a servant in her own home. Some years pass, and there's an upcoming series of royal balls to attend. The stepsisters get all dolled up and leave Cinderella at home. If you're in France, a fairy godmother shows up and transforms a pumpkin into a carriage, mice into horses, and gives Cinderella a beautiful gown to wear. If you're in Germany, Cinderella's pigeon friends tell her to ask her mother's death tree for help, and the tree gives her a fancy dress to wear. Cinderella attends the ball and the prince is smitten with her. However, she must leave before midnight to avoid her magic dress vanishing or her family discovering her. Her stepfamily returns home talking of the mysterious princess that no one knew and that simply disappeared before the night was over. The next night, same deal. Stepfamily leaves, fairy godmother or magic tree, new beautiful gown. Cinderella has such a good time at the ball that she almost forgets to leave and rushes out as the clock strikes midnight. If you're in France, she accidentally loses one of her glass slippers on the steps. If you're in Germany, the prince has spread tar on the steps, causing one of her golden slippers to get stuck. Cinderella gets away, a shoe gets left behind. The next day, word spreads that the prince will marry the girl who fits the shoe. If you're in Germany, the stepsisters slice off bits of their feet to try to fit into the slipper. The prince almost marries each one, but luckily the pigeons point out that blood is gushing out of the slipper, so crisis averted. Eventually, Cinderella is able to try on the slipper. Of course it fits because it's her slipper. Cinderella and the prince get married and live happily ever after. The end.
All right. In the film Ever After, here's the summary. In Renaissance-era France, a young girl named Danielle is the daughter of a widower, Auguste de Barbarac. Auguste marries Baroness Radmilla de Ghent, who moves in with Auguste and Danielle, along with Radmilla's two daughters, Marguerite and Jacqueline. Mere weeks later, Auguste suffers a heart attack and dies, leaving Danielle and the estate in the care of Radmilla. A decade later, we catch back up with Danielle, who now works as a servant in her own household as Radmilla has taken to spoiling her daughters while abusing Danielle. One morning, Danielle meets Prince Henry as the young prince is running from his royal responsibilities, including his parents' growing desire for him to wed. He bribes Danielle to keep their encounter secret, and Danielle then elects to use these newfound riches to buy back a family servant that Radmilla had sold to pay off some debts, and Danielle disguises herself as a courtier and and sneaks into the palace. While Danielle is attempting to convince the slaver to release the servant, the prince arrives and, taken with Danielle and her moral arguments, orders the servant released and asks Danielle her name. She lies and assumes the role of an actual courtier. That night, Henry agrees to find a bride within 5 days or marry the princess of Spain as his parents desire. Danielle and Henry then begin a whirlwind romance. Ultimately, she realizes she must confess her lie and tell him who she is, but is unable to upon Henry confessing his love for her and how she has changed him as a man and inspired him to construct a university. It's all very overwhelming. Ultimately, Radmilla locks Danielle in the cupboard after realizing that she has been courting the prince and takes her daughters to the ball in a vain final attempt to get the prince to marry Marguerite. Leonardo da Vinci, surprise, he's in this, helps rescue Danielle from the cupboard and sends her to the ball in her mother's wedding dress and some specially designed wings he made just for her. Danielle arrives just in time to stop the prince from being engaged to another woman and brings down the house in her gown, but ultimately is exposed as a liar by Radmilla before she can confess to the prince. Henry then rejects her and agrees to marry the Princess of Spain. During that wedding, it becomes clear that the Princess of Spain loves another man, and Henry calls off the whole thing as a farce before leaving to rescue Danielle, who has been sold to a weird, creepy arms dealer. Upon reuniting, Henry apologizes, confesses his love, and proposes to Danielle by placing her lost glass slipper upon her foot, which fell off when she was running from the ball in shame after being exposed. Radmilla and Marguerite are humiliated by the king and the queen, but spared banishment to America by Danielle, who is now the princess, and Danielle and Henry live happily ever after. That's the name of the movie. The end. That's about it.
Yeah,
there's a few other things, but that's
yeah.
most of it. There you go. We do not have a Guess Who this week. I guess there's not character
Yeah,
description.
there's not really. There are descriptions of some of the like dresses,
Okay.
but there aren't really character descriptions.
Right. Fantastic. Then it is time now to move on and let me ask a bunch of questions. Was that in the book?
Nicholas Flamel is the only known maker of the Philosopher's Stone.
The what?
Honestly, don't you two read?
So we talked about in the prequel episode all of the elements that make a Cinderella story. And I was a little worried that I wouldn't have questions. And because of this, I think I know the answer to a lot of these questions, but I tried to ask them in a way, because there are a bunch of different versions of Cinderella, obviously. I tried to ask in a way where it maybe gets to anything to see if this film was pulling any of its elements that are not what I traditionally associate with Cinderella, if those come from any of the other and now obviously you only read these two versions, but I know you're familiar with other not adaptations, other versions of Cinderella. So a lot of these questions are just kind of seeing if the movie pulled anything from long lost other versions of Cinderella. So my first one, and we mentioned it in a few minutes ago, that there's a frame story in this movie where the brothers Grimm arrive at this estate, and this woman, who I think I looked on Wikipedia, is the Grand Dame.
Yeah.
Whatever that is.
She's supposed to be like the great
she's the great
related
granddaughter
to
of Danielle
and Henry.
Right,
somehow.
but she has some sort of title that I'm unaware, that I don't know what it is.
French nobility that made it through the revolution, apparently.
Yeah. But the Brothers Grimm arrive, and she has summoned them there because she read their book, their stories, and likes them, but they got Cinderella all wrong, and she's going to set the record straight. And I assume that there is no any sort of frame story in the fairy tale of Cinderella. Is that the case?
I forgot this movie had a frame story until we started watching it. It is interesting. It directly references Perrault and the existence of like multiple Cinderella stories.
Because it specifically references a thing we talked about in the prequel, which maybe I had a note here, is that one of them has a line that says, "Some say the shoe was made of fur, others insist it was glass," which was a thing you mentioned in the prequel episode.
Yeah. A possible mistranslation, although most people think it's not, and it was just glass.
Right.
A mistranslation of Perrault specifically. So yeah, the frame story. To answer your question, there is no frame story in either story that I read.
Right.
There's usually not in folk tales. They're pretty short, generally.
But I could have seen, it wouldn't have been outlandish to me that a fairy tale could have something along, not this exact frame story, obviously, with the Brothers Grimm, but the idea of somebody telling this tale to somebody else could have been a reasonable, 1001 Arabian Nights or whatever that's a frame story with basically
with a bunch of folktales. Yes.
So like I was wondering, it could have been something like that, but not in this instance.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I wonder if the movie needs the frame story.
I don't think it needs it. But
I don't think it needs it, but it is interesting.
It's kind of a fun little bit of meta commentary that I think works, especially when we get to the fact that because this movie excises all magic. To where it is just it's a fantastical historical drama. Like there's some
gimmies.
There's some and some what's the word where things are out of time, anachronisms. I think we'll talk about. But in general, it's doing some. But there's no magic. Is the point? There's not the traditional fairy tale.
There's no
magic.
Fairy godmother. No pumpkins turning into carriages, etc. No
animals turning into people or anything like that. It's purely magicless, other than the magic of love. So we mentioned her dad as he's leaving for a trip. He has a heart attack and dies. And I was wondering, is it typical for her father to die somehow? I believe it is, because that's how she ends up in the care of the evil stepmother. Is it typical for her father to die, and is it usually a heart attack or some other thing?
So the father dying
because the heart attack I was not expecting that.
Yeah. And I remembered like some about this movie, but not a lot of details. And I thought it was going to be that she like poisoned him for a second. But I think, he just have a heart attack. So Cinderella's father dying is pretty common in modern adaptations, but actually not in folktale variants.
Really?
Yeah. A lot.
He's just a pushover who lets the stepmother abuse.
Yeah. Okay. A lot of modern versions will kill him off and thereby absolve him of ignoring this abuse, but the majority of the older tales do not do that. He's there. Maybe he travels a lot for work, but he's alive, so 100% guilty of inaction at the very least.
In the Disney one, is he alive?
No, he's dead in the Disney one.
Okay. So we mentioned the stepsisters. This is a very common one. She often has multiple stepsisters, usually evil, but not always. And that's the instance in this one where we have one stepsister who is nice and one who is not. And I wanted to know if that's common for there to be one nice stepsister.
The element actually is mined from the folklore. Okay. So out of the two versions that I read, Perrault describes the younger sister as not quite so spiteful.
Okay, so not a glowing endorsement.
Not a glowing endorsement, but she's not quite so spiteful.
Right.
And the Grimm's version says that the younger sister had a little sympathy in her heart. Okay. So it's fairly common for there to be one who's like super nasty and another one who's like
less
so.
Okay.
Like maybe let's not torment her all the time.
And then this movie takes that with Jacqueline and turns it up to where she is. Yeah.
And this one is interesting to me because my perception is that a lot of people generally consider that to be a modern twist, but it's actually not.
I don't know if I would consider it a modern twist, but I might. I mean, because I mean, the thing is, and as we mentioned before, not everybody, but most people's ideas of what Cinderella is the Disney movie.
Yeah.
So if it's not what the story in the Disney movie is, most people just don't know.
Yeah. And that is what's interesting to me, because like around mid-century when the Disney film came out, there was this kind of flip, and we went from like what's more typical in the folklore of having one of the sisters be nice to now both of the sisters are mean.
Right.
So like on the other side of that, when you get an adaptation like Ever After and one of the sisters is nice, it feels like a departure from the norm. But like folklore wise, it's actually not.
Yeah.
Do you see what I'm saying?
No, I see what you're saying. Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, for sure. And I like it. Correct me if I'm wrong, but the Rodgers and Hammerstein version we saw live. We went and saw a stage production of this at our local university theater a month ago. And I believe one of the sisters was less evil in that one as well.
Now we saw a version with an updated book.
Yeah, it's Rodgers and Hammerstein, but it's not. Yeah, it's one of the million different versions of Rodgers and Hammerstein.
OG Rodgers and Hammerstein. Like if you've seen the Brandy version or the older Leslie Ann Warren version, those have two evil stepsisters.
Okay. Yeah.
But this one that our local university put on was a book that was updated, I want to say around 2013 or 2014.
Oh, really? I didn't know any of the details.
And they made some changes to some of the characters.
Yeah. Yeah, it's interesting, which we'll talk more probably about that in the patron bonus episode. When we're talking about the Rodgers and Hammerstein version, we'll probably compare some of what we saw in this
I'm
show.
sure you'll have a lot of thoughts on it.
Yeah, I'll be interested to see, because I did enjoy this updated version that we saw, and not everything about it, but I enjoyed some of the changes.
But you're not familiar with the
not
original
at all. I don't think I've
version,
seen any of the.
yeah.
I don't think I've seen the original Rodgers and Hammerstein, any of the versions of it.
So tune in for that. You're
There you
interested
go.
in getting Brian's thoughts.
Yes. So we were also introduced fairly early on to a friend of Danielle, who by the name of Gustav, who is like just another neighborhood friend, I think, or he might work he might be a servant. I don't know.
Like
he seems
when
to be
he's
like a
kid,
neighbor or
it seems
something.
like he's a neighbor, or like maybe a kid of one of the people who lives on the estate or something.
Yeah, maybe that's what it is. Maybe he's the kid of one of the other servants.
But
or something.
then later on, when he's older, he's like a painter's apprentice.
Yeah. Anyways, his name's Gustav, and I wanted to know if that character had a parallel in any of the fairy tales.
No, not from the ones that I read. But I did like this edition just fine.
Yeah.
I do question if the movie tried to subtly make him her gay best friend.
It does feel, actually, to me, it felt more like they were going for sort of like a Ducky character. Like he's like the friend zoned friend.
I didn't get friend because I didn't feel like he was into her at all.
Maybe not. He's not in the movie enough to really.
Yeah, but there's one moment when she first dresses up as nobility, and he's like, "Okay, now let's do something with your hair."
Oh yeah,
and that felt like gay best friend tropey to me.
Yeah, no, that is fair. That's fair. But he also,
That's kind of the only moment of it.
Yeah,
but
it is interesting. Yeah, I wonder if that's if that was what they were going for. They didn't do much with it at all. So we get a scene, and this is some of the anachronism that I was talking about, where they play tennis / racquetball game in the movie. It's like a hybrid where they're like hitting the ball off the wall. And I don't know if this is a real thing. I wanted to know if the story ever has anything with racquetball, tennis, a sport. And I also want to know what this is and if it's a real thing.
So no to tennis or racquetball being in the folklore. Now, according to Wikipedia, because I looked this up when I saw you had a question about it, I was like, history of tennis, go. But according to Wikipedia, tennis is thought to have originated in 12th century France. So I guess it is French, so there's that. It does look a lot more like racquetball, what they're doing, than like actually tennis.
I just found a thing. Here we go. Where'd it go? It just disappeared. The type of tennis played in Ever After is real tennis, also known as royal tennis. In contrast to the now, and this is from the Ever After wiki. In contrast to the now better-known lawn tennis, the walls are part of the game, as are the galleries from which spectators view the game. In the 16th century, the game gained popularity. Players had also just begun to use rackets instead of gloves, and the rules had stabilized. So apparently it is a real thing, and that is
Interesting.
kind of... Which doesn't surprise me that there are different versions that have... And
Yeah.
some of those have morphed into squash and racquetball and other, similar types of racket games. But interesting. It's a real thing. There you go. Because it did, to me, it struck me. It reminded me. I felt like it was like a moment that reminded me of like watching what's the dueling, the jousting movie, A Knight's Tale.
Oh,
where there's
yeah.
like anachronistic things in that, and it's like kind of playing with history.
And that's part of the style of that
Yeah,
movie.
yeah.
But I think here that's not necessarily part of the style of it, so it would have been a little odd.
Yeah. So there may not. I may have misspoken earlier when I said there was anachronistic things. There may not actually be the case. Other than we know that, and we'll talk about it here in a second, that they had the thing wrong about what the Mona Lisa was painted on. So then we're introduced to this character named Lepew or something like that, and he's just sort of like creepily hitting on Cinderella, and his character is very strange. Mm-hmm. He's only in like 3 scenes in the movie, but he becomes important later on, which we'll talk more about later. But I wanted to know if this character had any basis in the story, because I was like, I don't remember this in any of the versions of Cinderella that I've seen.
He does not. He's just like a random cartoon villain that the movie decided to add. And I had this in Better in the Book. Because I like the second act edition of Another Villain is certainly a choice, I think. I almost wonder if there was like a studio note that like the stakes weren't high enough. Or that they thought that they needed a villain that Danielle didn't have like a complex emotional relationship with.
I guess.
I don't know. To me, the addition of this character didn't make a whole lot of sense.
No, I do like how it resolves, which we'll get to later. But I don't know. It didn't feel super necessary.
Well, it just kind of comes out of nowhere. Like all of a sudden, it's this like, oh, here's this guy who looks like a cartoon pirate.
Yeah.
And like
as an arms dealer,
apparently hits on her all the time, even though we don't see him until like halfway through the movie.
We see him once early. I think we see him once fairly early. At least I think. I mean, it's this. My question is fairly early here in my questions, and I so. Like he's introduced fairly early, but he doesn't become. Then he disappears the rest of the movie, and then he shows up again in the third act to be like, I'm buying you. It's
mustache twirling.
Yeah, literally mustache twirling. So we get a scene very early that I thought was super interesting, and I will say it's a little weak only because it doesn't really go anywhere. But we get a scene very early on where Cinderella, Danielle, is having a conversation with Radmilla, Angelica Houston, her stepmother character, and they're talking about her dad, and they're having this conversation. And this is, obviously a decade plus after her father died. And we actually get kind of a moment of vulnerability for her. And they actually kind of have like a connection very briefly in this scene that I thought was really interesting. And I wanted to know if that's typical for any of these stories to have that kind of like a vulnerable scene for the stepmother and a moment of connection through their like mutual hatred. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. Again, the movie doesn't ever really expand on that after this scene. Like, we don't really take it anywhere, but at least thought it was interesting, kind of giving Radmilla some depth beyond just being a cartoonish evil stepmother.
No, I agree. And this is not an element that's generally present. Of course, as we discussed, her father usually isn't dead. And the father-daughter relationship usually isn't portrayed as being like particularly close. He's kind of a non-character. Like if you crack open like Perrault or Grimm's or what have you, he's just particularly important to the story. Yeah, I guess so. And what's interesting upon rereading these, because it had been a while since I'd read any folklore variation of Cinderella, and something that I had forgotten is that the stepmother almost kind of disappears from the narrative as well. The main antagonists it's more of the stepsisters.
Really?
Yeah.
It's interesting. Yeah, this movie definitely keeps the stepmother front and center as the main
Yeah, for sure.
foil, the main villain.
And
of the
I do
story.
think that this movie does a pretty good job of showing how complex the relationship between Danielle and the Baroness would be.
Yeah, and I liked the idea that it does make this one scene does make you wonder that had her father never died, maybe things would have been entirely different.
Yeah, maybe.
Like maybe not. Maybe her she still would have been an abusive. But one, you don't get the feeling from her father in this movie that he would have allowed that. At least from
No.
the few scenes he's
No,
in.
for
Like
sure not.
it doesn't seem like he would have like let that fly and just been okay with it or whatever. He doesn't seem like an uninterested sort of like
Yeah.
absent father who like wouldn't care. He seems very committed and involved in his daughter's life when he's home. He travels a lot for work, but at whatever he does, I'm not. Is he like a
He was
merchant?
like a
or
merchant, yeah.
But it does kind of give you the idea that it had that not happened, that Rodmilla did in fact love her father a lot, or at least to some extent, and were that tragedy not to befall them, that this whole thing may not have played out the way it did.
Yeah.
That event was the thing that kind of pushed Rodmilla down this path where she became the horrible person that she is. I don't know. I thought it was interesting. I like that scene. Like I said, I wish they would have done something else,
something a
kind
little
of
more with it.
continued with
Yeah.
that like dynamic, and had another scene later on where we felt a similar sort of vulnerability. I mean, because the only thing close would be like the end scene, but then that's all like when Danielle like
Has her triumphant moment.
yeah, but that's all just about like power fantasy, like
Yeah.
girl boss moment. It's not really like a layered like interesting look at their relationship or anything. So we mentioned the evil stepsisters. Marguerite is the evil one in this instance. There are two stepsisters. Jacqueline is Jacqueline. I don't know how to pronounce it. Is the nice one. And Marguerite at one point has makes a really shitty comment about Danielle's dead mom, and Danielle just pulls back, hauls off, and decks her in the face. And I wanted to know if any of the stories does Cinderella ever just haul back and punch a stepsister, because that's a great scene. I love that scene.
No, but I wish she would. I love that scene too. I have a very distinct memory of watching this movie at a sleepover in probably like third or fourth grade. It would have been like 10 or 11, 9, 10, 11, somewhere in there. And everyone cheering during that scene.
I mean, how could you not?
I know.
It's great. I love that. I thought she was going to slap her, but she doesn't. She just punches her in the face. It's great. And then after that, I believe it's after that, she ends up, or somewhere around there. Doesn't matter necessarily, but she ends up getting a lashing, which I was very unexpected. Like again, from the versions of Cinderella I've seen, it's all generally like emotional abuse and like a physical abuse in the sense of like starving her or like making her sleep on the floor, like that kind of, but not like
doing hard labor.
Yeah, but not like tying her to a post and like giving her 50 lashes or like that was very strange to me. And I want to know if that came from the book or if that was something this movie did to like up the stakes.
It's not in either version that I read. That doesn't mean that there's not a variation of Cinderella where something similar happens.
Yeah. Huh. Okay. It felt, I don't know, it didn't, well, because then I wondered, like, who did it?
I wondered the same thing because I couldn't imagine Rodmilla doing it, really.
No, Rodmilla wouldn't have done it, and then who would have, though?
Yeah.
Because none of the other help, all the help likes her. Like, she works with the help.
But they're all, like, really old, too.
Yeah, they're all old, or they're, like, her friends. I just don't know who would have done, I don't know, it just seemed strange. It seemed like a little bit, I don't know.
Maybe they hire a freelance, I don't know.
Yeah. Whatever. So then it's time for the ball in the film. And in this movie, it is a masquerade ball. And so the stage play we watched, it was a masquerade ball. But I believe in the Disney one, it is not. Right. Or the original animated Disney movie, it is not. And I wondered if the masquerade ball thing, is it normally just a regular ball? Is it a masquerade ball? Does it depend on the version? I assume it probably it bounces around. Mm-hmm. Anyways, what's the deal with the ball?
So this is an interesting question. Now, neither version that I read specifically states that the balls are masquerades, but I don't think that means necessarily that they aren't. I just don't know enough about medieval and Renaissance party culture to know if wearing a mask or costume would be something that you just did.
Oh.
Do you see what I'm saying?
I see what you're saying. I would think that you wouldn't unless it was a specifically called for. I mean, there are plenty of balls, I think. I could be wrong, but I'm fairly certain in medieval and Renaissance times, there are plenty of balls and parties that were not, like, you would specifically not come because in a mask or whatever, because the point is to, like, be seen and, like, know, like, that it's like a special occasion. I would think.
I want to raise the question, would the text even need to say that it's a masquerade, or would that have been assumed by the audience at the time?
That's an interesting question.
I don't really know.
I think the text would have said, because again, I do think that it wouldn't have been assumed, because it's just not every ball or party was a masquerade ball or party. I don't think. At least I could be wrong. I don't know.
I am a sucker for retellings that make the ball a masquerade, though.
Yeah,
it makes so much sense. And we don't need it in this version because of other changes to the story. But
that is true,
It's a perfect explanation for why the prince wouldn't recognize her later.
Yes.
She was wearing a mask.
Yes.
Of course he doesn't know what her face looks like.
It very much helps that, if the later version of the story. That being said, in this version, it doesn't matter.
Yeah,
which
doesn't.
is funny that they then still make it a masquerade.
I mean,
Although she's not wearing a mask.
She's not really wearing a mask. She has glitter on her face.
Yeah,
but
she's not wearing a mask, to be fair. Yeah, she broke the rules of the party. Somebody should have walked over and, like, party foul and, like, dumped a drink on her head while she's, like, that's, like, this big, it's the big, like, pinnacle moment of the movie. She walks in with all of her glitter and her wings, and somebody just comes over and dumps, like, a goblet of ale on her head because she's not wearing a mask at a masquerade. So speaking of the masquerade ball and her grand entrance, is there any version of the story that you're aware of where her dress has wings? Because that is the big thing from this one. Because Leonardo da Vinci, he's working on flying machines. He likes wings, so he gives her wings on her dress.
So neither of the versions that I read did. Again, that doesn't mean that there isn't a version out there where she goes to a masquerade and dresses as some kind of creature with wings.
Right.
But not that I'm, like, cursorily aware of.
Yeah.
At this moment.
Mm-hmm.
Also, I feel like the vibe in the costuming department for her ball gown costume was like, how can we do Romeo and Juliet without doing Romeo and Juliet?
Romeo plus Juliet.
Yeah.
Specifically, not just any Romeo and Juliet.
Yeah.
you gotta say that. You in the notes I can see the plus sign, but you
because I actually don't know if you say it plus or not. I have no idea.
Well, when you're referring to it in an audio medium by name, you say Romeo plus Juliet, so people know what you're talking about.
Romeo plus Juliet, because it's a very clear call to this. That was just a couple years before.
Yeah, it was 96.
Movie. Yeah, it's a very clear call to Claire Danes' white dress with the angel wings.
Yeah, it definitely feels like they're going for the same vibe, and it was just that whole deal was this time period of cinema making that was the look of a lot of stuff for sure. So we mentioned Le Pew earlier, but after Radmilla ruins everything and breaks the news to Henry that Danielle has been lying about who she is, and he rejects her, and she storms out later or the next day or whatever. Radmilla ends up selling Danielle to Le Pew to cover debts that they had accrued. So they're able to get all their stuff back that they had been selling over time, but they basically had been pawning, essentially. He's like a pawn. He's like a pawn shop, kind of, because he had all the stuff still. Yeah. They were able to get all their stuff back.
Was he a bad pawn shop? He wasn't doing anything with it.
Well, maybe they got it within the time period. That's how pawn shops work, is that you hold it for X amount of days, and if you don't, if you pay it off by X amount of days, then you get your stuff back. If you don't, then they sell it. So I don't know. But anyways, he also mostly seems to deal in swords, because in his his dining room or like the big hall, just weapons and stuff everywhere. But Radmilla sells Danielle to this guy to cover their debts. And also because she hates Cinderella. Is that an element of any of the stories? Obviously, this character isn't, but we talked about him earlier. But this element of like selling Cinderella to somebody.
No. And I have questions about whether you could just sell your servants in 16th century France.
I believe you could, because I believe they would be like, if they're indentured. I don't think you could sell. I could be wrong. I don't know if you could sell somebody like Danielle, because she's not an indentured. I don't think she's just like, but. at least to some extent, there were like indentured servitude and stuff where you could
Right.
sell people, like servants to other people, I think. Again, I don't know about this particular instance, and I don't know the details of it, but I think it's potentially reasonable that something like this could happen. Especially off the with this, it's off the like.
That's true.
He's like
Yeah.
a shady guy, you know.
Yeah.
Like, yeah. I don't know. Who knows how legal any of this transaction
That's
was.
fair.
So we get to the big wedding where the prince has agreed to marry the princess of Spain because he wasn't able, you know, his heartbroken from Cinderella and everything that transpired there with Danielle. But he gets to the wedding and the princess is just wailing the entire time. And eventually Henry figures out what's going on and just starts laughing and calls the wedding off because she's in love with some other guy, some schlubby guy in the crowd.
Yeah.
And she runs and embraces him. And I wanted to know if any of that story, anything from that wedding scene, has any resemblance or inspiration from the story. I don't think so.
No,
Okay.
it doesn't. I feel like that would have started a war.
Yeah, it does feel a bit. I will say that the most anachronistic thing about this movie, at least to me, and I could be wrong, again, not being an expert on medieval / Renaissance like geopolitics and royalty and stuff, but like the sort of cavalier attitude that all of these like royals sort of treat things, like they're all like real chill and laid back about everything in a way that seems kind of unrealistic. Again, for the movie it works, but it is definitely the element of this historical drama that feels the most sort of fanciful, to some extent.
Well, and like close to the beginning, Rodmilla and Marguerite are upset that he's supposedly marrying some foreign princess, and I'm like, that's like what royalty does.
That's like all
though.
they did, yeah.
They just married each other and formed alliances.
I thought it was really weird or interesting that that there was like, even the idea that
even like the expectation that he would marry somebody from the French gentry as the crown prince. I feel like the answer's no.
Yeah, I don't know. It's very strange. The whole thing just kind of plays out again a bit as a joke intentionally. It's a fun scene, but yeah, so not anything from any of the stories, because again, it just felt this all feels a little silly, but in a way that works, in a way that I enjoyed. And my last question is: after everything has transpired, Henry and Danielle have been married. Danielle is now the princess of France or whatever. And then they bring Rodmilla before the king and queen, and they dress her down and remove all her titles, and are threatening to banish her to the Americas. A fate worse than death. Truly. And I wanted to know, but she is spared at the last moment by Danielle, who's like, I'll speak for her and she can stay here, blah, blah, blah. But then dunks on her or whatever. I wanted to know if in the story, does Cinderella sort of spare the evil godmother in any way from any sort of bad sort of retribution or whatever?
Okay, so as per Perrault, Cinderella forgives her stepsisters at the end of the story and helps them marry high-ranking gentlemen. No mention of the stepmother at the end. We don't know what she's doing. In the version of Grimm's that I read yesterday, it just says that her stepfamily grew pale when the slipper fits, and then they kind of disappear from the narrative.
Not important anymore.
However, there are older versions of Grimm's where the stepsisters' eyes get pecked out by birds. So to answer your question, this is specifically a movie edition, but it does draw from an older tradition of the stepfamily getting some kind of comeuppance at the end of the story.
Right. You did mention that in the prequel.
And I do love this scene. I liked it.
I mean, it's fine. It's good.
I can tell from your attitude that you didn't care for it, but I like it.
It's not that I didn't care for it. I think it's fun. I just think it's, I don't know, it's a little like expected. Like it's a little, I don't know. I just loved how much the movie didn't do what I was expecting it to do for the rest of it, for the most part. Like, and I enjoyed that a lot. And then this scene where she just comes in and like very hoidily is like, I will forgive you. I am like it I don't know. It just kind of, something about it just didn't work for me in the same way. Like, but I think I also get it and didn't dislike it.
All I ask is that you show her the same courtesy that she has bestowed upon me.
Yeah.
I like that line.
Yeah,
I
it's a
think
good
it needs
line.
an edit with air horns.
Yeah, for sure.
Also, I like the irony at the end because the thing that Rodmilla wanted was having a daughter on the throne.
Yeah.
And if she had treated Danielle like a daughter, she would have had it.
I agree. I do like that irony a lot. I enjoy that quite a bit. I think that works really well. And again, overall, I liked the end. I like that she doesn't, just kick her out or let her, be executed or whatever. I don't know. Overall, I liked it. I just, something about it didn't quite work the way a lot of the rest of the movie did. Anyways, that was all my questions. I do not have a Lost in Adaptation. I almost did at one point, but ended up deleting it, and I think I just turned it into a Was That in the Book? So I don't have any more questions, but Katie has a lot to talk about in Better in the Book.
You like to read?
Oh, yes. I love to read.
What do you like to read?
Everything.
So this first point isn't necessarily a Better in the Book, but I do want to say that in 2022, the prince who doesn't want to be a prince and the unconventional tomboy princess both feel a little tired at this point.
Yeah.
Like a little bit. And I get it. It was made in 1998, so maybe we had not had our fill of that, but it does feel like another dozen adaptations of Cinderella later. I'm kind of like, okay.
I don't disagree. They're definitely maybe not at the time retreading, kind of cliches of these characters, but I will say that I thought that was one of the things that was really interesting about Danielle's character. She doesn't come across as particularly tomboyish. Like, I didn't feel like it was as over the, like...
I think she is a much more balanced character
Yes.
than some variations on that trope.
Like, I was, like, going into the movie, I was kind of expecting it to be a little bit more like girl boss.
Yeah.
Like, I'm
Gaslight,
not like
gatekeep girl boss,
other girls Cinderella. As I was expecting a little more of that than what we got in the movie. So the fact that she is kind of just like a layered, interesting character who has elements of her character that are, less traditionally feminine of the time, and other elements that are, like, I don't know. I thought her character worked really well, and the prince was fine. Like, he was all right. That sort of cliche. I don't want the throne. I want to ride horses, or I want to be able to live my own life kind of deal. But I also like that the movie addresses that to some extent, and she kind of calls him out on it with that line about his privilege and his responsibility because of the privilege and that sort of thing. I liked again, even though I was expecting them to be even more sort of tropey and thinly written. I say even more because I don't think they are tropey or thinly written in this movie. I was expecting them to be, and then when they weren't, I was like, So the fact that there's a little hint of like that didn't bother me at all.
Fair enough. So as I was reading Perrault, something jumped out at me that made me laugh that I had to go ahead and do a little bit of research on. I'm about to say a dirty word, so if you're listening with your kids, mute this for a second.
Did I cuss already?
I don't know.
All right, I'll try to pay attention.
I'm just saying. Or perhaps like cover their ears for a moment.
Yes.
So in Perrault, one of the things that the stepsisters call the title character, aside from Cinderella, is Cinder Slut.
Wow.
So I had to look this up because I was like, surely there's another layer to this that my modern brain is not understanding, and there is. So the word slut comes from 15th century Northern German and initially meant a dirty, slovenly woman.
Okay.
Now, it could mean a woman with loose morals. At the time, there's evidence of it being used that way, but the primary meaning of the word was untidiness.
Okay.
Up until the 1960s, when we started to see the specific modern sense of a woman who enjoys sex to a degree that's considered shameful.
I'm surprised it took that long because the jump there seems obvious.
The jump, yeah.
Like the idea, like the move from an unclean woman to an unclean woman because, you know, like a prostitute or something
Right.
who didn't have, you know, access to tradition, you know, like hygiene in the same way as other people. That jump seems like it's right there for the taking. It's surprising to me that it would have taken to the 60s for that to make that jump. Huh. Interesting. But yeah, it's not, they don't use it in this movie.
No.
And they're nice.
No, they don't.
I'll get to a potentially lewd line later.
Essentially innuendo-ish.
Innuendo-laden line later, but we'll get there.
So don't come for me, but I'm not sure I understand the addition of Leonardo da Vinci to this story. Like,
I don't disagree.
It's fun, but what does it add to the story overall?
Wings.
I feel like they just really wanted to work in that painting that kind of looks like Drew Barrymore.
Which they even make a joke about, that it doesn't
really
look
look
that much like her. Yeah. I know.
I'm like, it could have just been any painter.
Yeah, I guess it's Da
Inventor
Vinci
man.
mainly because he's a known person,
Right.
And they like you said, they had some painting. They found a painting that kind of looked a little bit like Drew Barrymore, like enough to, you know, to have that to tie it in somehow. Plus, then they can do the thing with the Mona Lisa. Like, I think that it's just that this is a character that people know, and we got to replace our fairy godmother with somebody.
Right.
So let's replace it with this, you know,
Leonardo da Vinci.
Leonardo da
Why not?
Vinci, like a polymath of the time who has, you know, he can help her escape from this thing because he's like, he knows all kinds of stuff. He knows about.
Yeah,
like,
and I don't think it's in detriment to the film.
No.
But it's certainly, like, I think something that could have been written differently and you wouldn't necessarily notice.
I also just think that he didn't even feel like Da Vinci to me. Like,
you know Da Vinci personally?
No, but I actually have been to his house, his child, or like his home or whatever in Italy. I actually did visit, and I saw the bed he died in, like the actual bed that he died in. Yeah. I took a tour of his estate or whatever.
The way you said that was
what?
Like, no, but I've been to his house. I don't know.
I have. I saw a bunch of stuff. It was interesting. It was really cool. But I like something about maybe it's the performance or I don't know. He just didn't feel as like. You would think if you're writing Da Vinci into your movie and he's like this, one of the most famous people of all time, literally. And he's like this mysterious, like, again, polymath. He's a genius in like everything supposedly and blah, blah, blah. I would think I was just expecting him to be a more like interestingly written character.
They went with kind of a thin trope, I think, of like the kooky old artist man.
Yeah, but not even in a way that's like
it wasn't super
particularly like kooky. Like it would have been one thing if they even leaned into that harder and made him more eccentric than he comes across. He just kind of seems like an old guy.
Yeah,
who knows a couple things.
The most eccentric part was the water shoes.
Yeah,
the boat shoes.
Yeah,
but.
I don't like his dialogue and like he just, I don't know. I just found him kind of boring and I feel like I shouldn't find Da Vinci boring. Like he shouldn't be a boring character. And I kind of found his character boring in the movie, which was disappointing because I thought it was an interesting conceit. And I think it works for the film. Again, yeah, it doesn't need it to be Da Vinci. I don't know. They just wanted it to be somebody interesting. So they're like, Da Vinci, time period works out. There you go.
So that kind of leads nicely into my next point, which is that overall, I do think there might be too many elements going on in this movie. And it doesn't not work, but like it's a lot. Like we have our fleshed out Cinderella story and the prince who doesn't want to be a prince and a secret romance and all the plot with the stuff disappearing from the house and Leonardo da Vinci and a random cartoon villain man who wants to get with Danielle. And there's just like a lot going on.
The plot with the stuff disappearing from the house, I was so confused at what this was supposed to mean or what, like, I was like, what? You're supposed to not know because it's like a reveal at the end. Yeah. Oh, because she's like blaming it on the help and she's actually been pawning it. I'm like, so, okay, I get it. But it does feel like an extra thing that just doesn't need to be there. Yeah. Like, it just distracts from, again, what is
like
going
I said,
on.
I think the movie still works. It's a tight 90, so it doesn't drag or feel like it gets
It's a 2-hour
bloated.
movie.
Was it?
Yeah,
I thought
it was 120 minutes.
Okay.
Yeah.
So it's tight 120 then. But I don't feel like it drags. And like it doesn't feel,
No.
It doesn't feel bloated necessarily, but there's just like we probably could have dropped a couple of elements and been fine.
I agree. I think if you drop the LePew storyline entirely, there is a moment of it that I like, which we'll talk about. But I think you could drop that storyline and thus also drop the whole selling things, like all of that. Because it doesn't really add a lot. Like we find out that Rodmilla has been like financially neglectful to the estate,
right? But we could show that in a different way.
Show in a different way.
We could do something else with that.
Yeah, and then again, I think it's also that it's all for the moment where we think. I mean, the reason this all exists, I think, and this is the moment I like, is so that we'll just talk about it now because I keep alluding to it, and it's just in my odds and ends later.
I have it a couple points down.
Let's wait and we'll get to it in 2 seconds then. We'll get there in a second.
All right, next point. Let's talk about the presence of Romani people in this movie.
Yeah.
Okay, so I'm going to say the word once so that people who don't know what I'm talking about know what I'm talking about.
Because I think there's also a lot of people that are still unaware that this is not.
Yes. So the word gypsy is considered a slur by, I think, most Romani people. And obviously there's some give there.
Yeah,
but it is generally considered a slur.
Yes.
But there is a group of Romani people in this movie. They're very much used as set dressing.
Yeah.
They're depicted as thieves.
Yes.
And it's not like an interesting it seems like they're thieves, but they're actually not. They're very much thieves.
They're very much thieves. Yes.
But
they're also depicted as like good people, kind of. At least in a sense.
Well, we go to hang out with them with Danielle and Henry, but we don't actually interact with them.
Well, yeah, we don't interact with them, but like initially they're like it seems like they're gonna like, I don't know, kidnap them or there's an implication that they're gonna do something evil, but then they're like, never mind, just come hang out with us and party. And so I don't know,
But I feel like, and I think this is another place where maybe cutting some elements could have given this more room to breathe or something, because I felt like the movie wanted to explore the fact that these people are more than what they initially seem or are thought to be, but the movie doesn't actually do anything with it.
Yeah, I agree. It doesn't do anything with it. They're in like 2 scenes.
Yeah.
And
then Henry's like, I want to invite them to the ball, and then we never see them again.
Yeah, says they're there, but they don't.
Yeah, I don't think we see them at the ball.
Maybe
at all.
we do,
I
like
don't
a brief
remember
shot or
seeing
something.
them.
But yeah.
I do have to say that I love the "you may have anything that you can carry" bit.
Yeah, that's a fun
Henry.
scene, and she picks him up and starts carrying him away. Yeah,
thus winning them over.
I thought that was fun, but it could easily have just been a band of thieves, a band of it doesn't have
any brigand.
Yeah.
Didn't have to be Romani people.
No.
Anyway, so there's a scene where Rodmilla and Marguerite have tea with the queen, where Rodmilla realizes that Danielle has been passing herself off as nobility to hang out with the prince, and kind of tells Marguerite in code. And Marguerite gets up and has a random temper tantrum. And, I guess it's not wildly out of character, because we do see her kind of temper tantrum a few times throughout the film, but it felt dialed up a notch too high, and I felt like she would have the wherewithal to not do that in front of literally the queen.
I agree. It felt to me completely out, maybe not wildly out of character, but to me that you can do that same thing, because I get what they're going for, and I thought it works, but, you're right that it does feel like... She wouldn't do that literally right in front of the queen. If they had figured out a way for her to I don't know, if they were if they were indoors and she excuse me for a second and walks to the other room and you just hear something break and then she walks back in, same joke, but a little less ridiculous. You know what I mean?
Right.
She comes back in and she's and her hair is tousled and stuff, but she didn't literally have a screaming fit in front of the queen.
Yeah.
That would have been the same sort of joke, but not as ridiculous. I don't disagree. I thought the same thing during that scene. I was like, this doesn't. Okay.
A little moment from the Perrault text that I loved The first ball that Cinderella goes to, she sits with her stepsisters at the ball and talks to them all night, and they don't recognize her,
Nice.
which I kind of loved.
Yeah.
Okay, so here's the thing that you wanted to talk about, and I
Yeah.
think we feel differently about it, maybe.
Well, maybe. I mean, well, it depends. Maybe in the details. I don't know. Anyways.
So I don't know that I love the last second reveal that Danielle is an expert swordswoman.
I agree with that.
I think the movie wanted her to get herself out instead
Yes.
of having Henry rescue
Yes.
her, which is fine, and I like that. But I thought that her supposed prowess with the sword should have been planted and reminded before we paid it off.
Yes,
the end.
I agree completely that. Okay, so this is what I was talking about earlier, where the whole reason they include LePew and any of that plot line is all for this moment where she
Yes,
gets sold
absolutely.
to LePew, and then Henry finds out about this and then comes to rescue her. But surprise, she's not a damsel in distress. She rescues herself. And I get that, and that's the whole reason that whole plot line is in there, just so she can rescue herself
No, I totally
as
agree.
this subversion of this typical trope. And I think that's a fun idea, especially in 1998. It's not a played out idea at that time necessarily. And so that's what I like about the scene, is that inversion of that trope at a time where it feels, again, sort of fresh and new. I will agree completely that having her just randomly reveal, oh, I know how to sword fight.
Yeah.
And then also not even seeing her do
No.
anything is
We
disappointing.
just see her point the
Like
sword.
she points the sword at him and just says that she is, and maybe she's lying. Like that could be a fun
yeah,
thing too. Maybe
maybe.
she's not actually.
She's
She's just bluffing. Which could be a fun spin on it too. But I agree that if assuming she's not bluffing, that she actually is like does have these is a fencer or whatever and has been trained to fence. It absolutely would have made sense to set that up at some point and have that payoff. Very easy. Maybe there's a deleted scene, but just have her.
But we see her.
and-
We see her do enough stuff throughout the movie. They easily could have worked in.
Just have a little scene with her and Gustav
Yeah.
fencing at some point. Like her and her friend just like kind of practicing fencing, and she's better than him or something.
she handily disarms him.
Because she says throughout the movie like I'll whip, like she can beat him up, but
Yeah.
it's never implied that like a sword. Yeah, I 100% agree that it would have been way better to set that up and then pay it off with this moment and this reveal. That being said, I still like what the scene is doing. Subverting that trope, I think, is fun. Again, I think you could just get rid of all of that maybe and figure out a different way to do this potentially. But anyways.
So I really like the end of this movie. But something that I do miss that is present in a lot of different folklore versions of Cinderella is this kind of like sass at the end when she goes to try on the slipper. And she kind of does this thing like, oh, haha, let me try. Won't that be silly? I'm just the scullery maid. Let me try the shoe. But she knows it's her
right?
shoe.
Yeah.
I just find that fun.
No, that is fun. Yeah, for sure.
And my last random little note here, I kind of wanted to know what happened to the little toady guy who was passing information to Redmilla.
Yeah.
It's not important, but like, did she try to sell him out? Or was he able to just like duck his head and pretend nothing happened? Or maybe he died when he got clocked in the head.
I legitimately
looked
think
like a
he just
pretty
got
solid
murdered by
hit.
Gustav when
Yeah.
he got hit in the head there and just died. Yeah, Toby Jones, by the way, that actor. That's,
yeah?
he's in all kinds of stuff now. I thought it was very funny because that's why I included him. Like when I was going through the cast list for the prequel episode, I generally try to include as many people as possible, but if the list gets too long, I make sure I include all the main people and then like other names I recognize. And so I got down, I was like, holy cow, Toby Jones is in this, but he was billed way down the list. But yeah, he's in Captain America movies. He's what is that character's name? Dr. Zola, like the evil like German
the
doctor.
evil Hydra guy.
Yeah.
Okay.
He's also in the Hunger Games. He's Claudius. Where'd it go? Claudius.
The other host.
Yeah. He's Dr. Zola. Claudius Templesmith. He's the other announcer guy in the Hunger Games movies. And then I am fairly certain, if I can scroll back far enough, yes, he is the voice of Dobby in the Harry Potter movies. So there you go.
Interesting.
He's also been in Doctor Who at least once. He was the Dream Lord in an episode of Doctor Who. He's been in a bunch of stuff. So I recognize him immediately, but I thought it was really interesting that I don't think this is one of his first roles, but maybe it was. Let's scroll back. It is, Among the Beginning. He started having roles in like 93, 94, but he was in the 1998 Les Mis as doorkeeper. And he doesn't have a name
break.
in this. In this, he's just Royal Page. So, anyways, that's it for Better in the Book. It's time to find out now what Katie thought was better in the movie.
My life has taught me one lesson, Hugo, and not the one I thought it would. Happy endings only happen in the movies.
So I like the name change to Danielle.
I hated it.
Oh, you hated it?
No, I didn't. I just always wanted to call her Cinderella.
Yeah.
And I was,
So we usually don't know what Cinderella's real name is.
Right.
As Cinderella just means Cinder Girl or
Right.
Ash Girl. It's more of a denotation of her situation than it is her name. A lot of adaptations retrofit her name to Ella.
I was about to say, a lot of times
which
she's just Ella.
is fine, but probably like the most obvious route that you could take. So I liked Danielle. It was different.
Yeah, I think it's fine. Like I said,
Yeah.
it just I kept in my notes writing Cinderella and then trying to remember. No, it's Danielle.
I think everyone will know
It's
what we
fine.
mean.
Yeah.
I thought the movie's depiction of her relationship with her father was very sweet
Yeah.
at the beginning of the movie.
I agree. I liked
it
it.
felt real. I thought it was really interesting, and you kind of talked about this earlier. The idea that Rudmilla would hate Danielle because her husband directed his attention to his daughter in his dying breath, I think is really interesting.
Yeah.
And I feel like to go off of what you mentioned earlier, I feel like there is an implication that if he hadn't died, she might have eventually softened, and they all could have been like a family.
I agree.
maybe.
I think that's definitely sort of the implication
Yeah.
that we're supposed to pull from the film.
I liked the conceit that Danielle was already dressing up and impersonating a noblewoman like way before anything about a ball. Like that it's something she just kind of accidentally falls into and then has to maintain rather than having her randomly decide that she wants to party with royalty.
Yeah.
Which is fine in a lot of versions, but I don't think would work with this specific version of the character.
Yeah, I don't disagree.
Like, I don't think she would have any interest in going to the ball if she hadn't already had an established thing with Henry.
Yeah, I think it makes a lot of sense that they have this relationship already, and then
Yeah.
yeah.
Also, gotta love Comrade Danielle out here fighting for the working class.
Yeah, I had a note about how I love that she grew up reading Utopia, as like we're getting our third wave feminist woke Cinderella, which is fun. But it is an interesting. I thought the specific choice of Utopia was interesting. Now I don't know a lot about Utopia.
Yeah.
I've read a little bit. I've not read it at all, but I've read a little bit about it over the years. And I do know that it like the whole working class thing, like that is one of the sort of initial foundational texts that inspired a lot of the early trappings of what became the modern socialist movement. And when I say modern, I mean in 17th century France or whatever, like back in the French Revolution, all that sort of stuff. There's like a utopian socialist movement that had like drew some roots from Utopia, because I believe the society in Utopia, or at least in the second part of it, is basically like a socialist society, which that Thomas More had based a lot upon his experience in monasteries and stuff, and kind of how monasteries operate. And the little bit of reading I did about Utopia is very fascinating scholarly like breakdown of like interpretations of it, and people arguing about how much of it is satirical and how much like, because like a lot of the seemingly like ideas that Utopia puts forward are at odds with the actual beliefs that people know Thomas More held. And so there's like this very confusing sort of detangling of like what is meant to be like aspirational sort of thematic through lines in Utopia versus like him mocking those things. Like it's interesting. I don't know. I thought the whole thing was interesting, but I also liked that it wasn't like a super obvious thing that she was reading. I don't know. Like, I don't know what it would be, but like, I was glad that it was something that is lesser known and a more interesting, like, scholarly. I don't know. I thought I did like that was the book that she read a bunch growing up.
Yeah, it's interesting. And the thing too that I think is really interesting about that character choice for her is that Cinderella is a fairy tale that often adaptations will try to like make woke.
Yeah.
Or like make feminist. And I feel like this movie succeeds at that better than most.
Yeah, while not being super obvious about it. Like I
Yeah.
said, in the way that Cinderella is written, she isn't the
It kind of comes up from you from behind and succeeds at that.
yeah, and it does by giving her this book that her father gave her before she died, that she just has read nonstop since then, being the thing that inspires, that it gives a place for her forward-thinking, progressive views to come from. They don't just like
Yeah, they don't just manifest
in her because she's a good person. Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like they come from this
Yeah,
book that
she's
she spent her life
educated.
reading. Yeah. And I thought that was an interesting, I liked that element of it, to give her this grounds of, again, of sort of progressive politics, a subversive text at the time, and have that be the thing that inspires her trajectory. I thought was clever.
Henry gets in a solid snipe at his parents' marriage that I really enjoyed, when they're talking about his arranged marriage, and he's like, marrying a stranger hasn't made anyone in this room happy.
Yeah. Yeah, he does dunk on him.
I think the movie does a pretty solid job of explaining why the prince needs to pick a bride at/by the ball. Because this is not always an element in like folklore versions. Sometimes there's just a festival going on.
Right.
And the prince is going to be there, which is exciting. But the idea that the ball is specifically for him to find a bride is very much entrenched in the collective conscious now. So you do kind of have to address it in your adaptation.
Do you? I always just took the idea like that was just a thing that happened. Like, I didn't need a personally, I never really needed a separate like reason for why he's
Okay,
finding.
well, I guess you don't
You know what
have
I mean?
to address it, but I think it's good to
I don't think
address
it's
it.
I think it's fine. I think it works, and like his dad kind of giving him an ultimatum, and that sort of
Yeah.
thing. I think it all works. I just assumed that was a thing. Like in the same way that like when young women, they're like coming out party and they're like, you know what I mean? Like I figured it was one of those deals, like an old timey weird patriarchal thing where the prince picks a bride. Like it just seemed like a thing that happens. I don't know. Like at least for me, I didn't need an explanation, but I thought the explanation that was in the movie worked well. So
I loved Jacqueline's horse costume.
yes, yeah, it's good.
I also think that's fun that she gets like an implied romance with
Yeah.
Henry's like
His head of security
yeah,
or whatever
whatever
that
that guy is
Yeah.
supposed to be.
His footman or something like that. Yeah, it is fun.
And then we have at the ball the Baroness literally dressed as Maleficent.
Yeah, I was about to say, she's got horns on, which is a bold
Yeah.
choice, but it was like literally that's Maleficent. She's, yeah.
And it's a late medieval style of headdress called a hennin.
Hmm.
So really it's just like a slightly out of date costume, like within the context of this movie.
Yeah.
But it's still pulling on like Maleficent, that's the reference that modern
Oh,
viewers are gonna get
absolutely.
from that. So it's kind of brilliant.
Yeah. Yes.
I love the Spanish princess just full body sobbing and heaving during the
Yes.
wedding. It's a little over the top, but I think it works.
Yeah. I liked it. I liked that scene a lot. I thought it was fun. And I liked that he just starts cracking up.
Yeah.
And yeah.
I like that we still get a slipper scene at the climax of the story where he puts the slipper on her foot, even though we don't need it. But I like that the slipper is more of a symbol than like the object that helps him identify her. And that's great because honestly, the conceit that he would need to try the slipper on every girl is probably the weakest part of the fairy tale itself.
Yes. It's always been my biggest problem with the fairy tale.
I do think like you could read the slipper as only fitting on her foot because it's a magic slipper.
Sure.
But you could also read it as like a reinforcement of dainty femininity.
Yes.
Like her feet are so small and dainty. Smallest feet in the land.
Yes, I think it's definitely both.
Yeah.
That part of the story has always been like my least favorite. It's actually I remember one of the elements of the 2015 live action Cinderella that we actually saw that together, I think. Right?
Yes,
Yeah.
we did.
And that was like my biggest critique is that they didn't change that part of it at all from my memory. It's been a long time since I've seen it, but like they did the same thing. And I was like,
Yeah, I
really?
haven't seen that since we saw it in the
Yeah, I
theater.
haven't either. But
I think you could. I think if you made it clear that the reason that they were doing that was as like a guise to go to every home to see if they can find
Right.
her would be the way to do it.
right.
But then like what do you do? Because surely that shoe's gonna fit more than
More
one
than
girl.
one person, yeah.
Like her feet aren't that unique.
Yeah. Well, and that was my memory, that my specific memory that I remember having a critique of for the 2015 one. I thought like my rewrite of it was doing everything the same, but then when he finds her, as soon as he sees her, he just should know it's her, and he should just toss the shoe over his shoulder and like sweep her up and you know what I mean? Like that's what I want in that moment. At least, again, I get why they don't do it, but like I was like, that would be a fun sort of inversion of that, again, because like especially in that version, it's not a masquerade ball from my memory. I think he just sees her and knows what she looks like, I think. And so it really, like when he sees her again, it should just be like, oh yeah, that's her. Like,
well, and I think the 2015 one even does the thing where he meets her before the ball.
I think so too.
I'm pretty sure they like meet.
We
in
want to
the
preface as well that we have not seen it since it came out. We saw it in theaters when it came out and have not seen it since then. So we
quite
could be
early in our
misremembering,
relationship.
Very early in our relationship, yeah, within the first year. So I really like this change. I like making the shoe a symbol of his mistake rather than like this dumb MacGuffin that lets him find her. Like I have always, again, not been a big fan of that element of the story. I've always thought it's kind of silly. And I get it. But
and
like,
to be fair, too, a lot of times, even if adaptations do keep that element, we often will see something happening to the shoe, or what the identifying thing is Cinderella bringing out the other shoe.
Right.
Like in the 1950 animated, the shoe gets smashed.
Yeah.
Right? It breaks. But then she's able to be like, oh, well, that's fine. I have the other one.
Right.
So
yeah,
there's a lot that you can do with it, but it is kind of one of the weaker points of
There's
the
a lot
story.
you can do with it. The traditional version of what you do with it is my least favorite, I guess is the thing. Like the version, again, that's sort of like the 2015 version, and sort of the like commonly like the in cultural, like what's the word, like in the common consciousness version of Cinderella that everybody has, where he uses the shoe to find her and then he puts it on her foot and it's like, it's you. Wow, that part, like that's the least interesting. Like I don't like that version. So anything that the movie any version does that's different than that, I enjoy. And this one in particular, making it like him putting the ring on as like he proposes and does it, that I like. And again, because it's his fault that she runs out. It's not like a time limit. It's not a clock. It's not about to strike midnight and she runs out and drops the shoe. She runs out because
she's been rejected by him.
And so it is this token of his mistake and his and him sort of putting it on her and apologizing is bringing that full circle. And to me, that is a much more interesting and much more like endearing moment than the traditional version of what happens with that. So, all right, time to talk about a few things that the movie nailed.
As I expected, practically perfect in every way.
I have a couple things here. We do see Danielle asleep in the cinders by the fireplace, which is an element from folklore. That's why they call her Cinderella.
Indeed.
Covered in cinders. Which made me realize that being dirty and covered in cinders is supposed to be one of her like main character traits. Character trait is maybe not the right word, but like meh. But in the animated Disney version, they go to very great lengths to say that she's clean. There's a whole scene where she bathes. Anyway, that was just a thought that I had. I thought Danielle wearing her mother's gown to the ball was a nice call to the Grimm's version. And there are other versions that do something similar to Grimm's, where instead of a fairy godmother, she gets the dresses kind of from the spirit of her deceased mother. Because there's like this tree that she planted on her mother's grave, and then like the tree shakes and a dress falls down out of it. So like kind of like getting it from her mom.
Right.
So it's an interesting nod. And then when she arrives back home after the ball, she's all like wet and bedraggled and like her wings are all torn up. And I thought that was a nod to her finery vanishing before midnight, which is what we see in a lot of versions that will have like a fairy godmother or something similar.
Little detail, but it cracked me up and I don't know if it was on purpose. Probably not. When she storms out of the ball, her wing smacks Angelica Houston in the face. Did you notice that?
I didn't notice
As
that.
she's storming out, the wing like hits her in the face, and it seems unscripted. Like it seems like she's like, oh, like Angelica Houston's like, ugh, like whoops, but it kind of works and it's fun in a way. Like again, it was a little thing that I
Kind of
noticed.
like that they left that in.
Yeah, they decided to use that take. Maybe it was intentional. I don't
Yeah,
know,
maybe.
but it seemed like it wasn't, and it made me laugh. All right, we got a handful of odds and ends before we get to the final verdict.
The opening titles of this movie were so aggressively late 90s fantasy movie.
Yeah. Well, isn't it like over like a wide
Yeah,
landscape
it's
shot? It
over like
reminded
a-
me of I'm pretty sure the Princess Bride
Yeah.
opening title is over like a big landscape shot
Yeah.
like that. I'm
like
pretty
a
sure.
sunrise
Yeah.
landscape shot.
yeah.
And then like the very dated font
Yeah, like
appears
the
in
gold,
the sky.
like gothic,
Yeah.
like hand scrolly font. Yeah.
I was also very struck watching this with how young Drew Barrymore looks
Mm-hmm.
in this movie. She's 23. I looked it up. She was 23 at the time of filming. She looks like she could be a teenager, which I guess is good since her
She
character
was
is
playing
18.
a teenager. So we mentioned in the prequel that there's a note that they specifically that the Mona Lisa is painted on wood in reality, but in the movie they have it painted on canvas. And the note that I read on IMDb or whatever said that was intentional. And I was like, but why was it intentional? And now watching the movie, the idea I feel confident in saying the reason they did that is so that Henry can chase down this thief who has stolen this piece of art.
Right.
And we get the reveal of what it is instead of this guy lugging around a giant wooden Mona Lisa on his back, as he's got like a tube with the rolled up Mona Lisa in it.
Yeah.
So.
And then you pull it out of the tube and like, gasp.
Oh, it's
the Mona
it's
Lisa.
the Mona Lisa.
It's the painting everyone knows.
Right. And just for the sake of like the action chase scene, because like you could have done a similar thing where it's like covered or like wrapped in cloth,
Right,
and you
yeah.
like pull the cloth off and have the reveal. But I guess again they fall in water and stuff, so there's like, which that guy just died, right?
We never see
they
him
both
again,
fall off
so
that
I
cliff
guess.
together, and then he gets up, he surfaces and swims away, and we see hide nor hair of that other person again. I was like, he just drowned, I guess. All right, interesting. So I mentioned this line earlier, but I don't know if you noticed this. This is in the trailer too, because I noticed it in the trailer, and I noticed it again watching the film, where Radmilla is talking to Danielle at one point, and she says, "You poor little country girl," and she puts a lot of emphasis on the first half of country girl in a way that made me wonder if this movie was throwing a little C-word joke in my Good Christian Cinderella movie. I was like, I don't know.
Maybe.
It struck me that she put a lot of a stank on that first syllable. And I was like, all right.
You poor little country girl.
So something that was interesting to me about this movie is that the prince, like, okay, so Radmilla and Marguerite, they have this whole plot to get her married to the prince, but he knows them.
Yeah.
Like, he knows Marguerite, which is realistic because he would know, like, some of the courtiers.
Right.
But I thought it was interesting because I felt like there were moments throughout where it seemed like he was attracted to her.
Which I think makes sense.
Yeah.
I think that is, I don't think it's supposed to be like not the case, because like before he knows her at all, like there's no, they
Yeah.
have zero interactions. She's just some pretty woman.
Fair,
Like,
yeah.
Like she is pretty and he's into her, and then he talks to her more and is like, oh. No.
Fair enough.
Yeah, I think that's what's going on, at least. I think it's just supposed to be like, yeah, she's pretty, and yeah, sure, why not? There is a great line that that Cinderella has at one point where she's talking to Henry, and I don't remember, they're discussing money or something, and she says, "The penalty for being wealthy is that you have to live with the rich," which I thought was it's a good line. It's a good burn. Good line. And then we talked about it earlier, but there's this scene where Da Vinci is testing his like water walking shoes, and they're just boat holes.
Yeah.
They're literally just tiny boat holes. And it's very silly. I will say the effect looks pretty good. They clearly put something like under the surface of the water
Right.
that he's walking on.
But it looks pretty good.
And it's fun. But that scene was silly. It's whatever.
Was that an actual like thing that he tried to invent? Do you know?
Probably. He had so many millions of things that he tried that it's probably true that he had. You know,
Yeah.
I don't know, but it wouldn't surprise me. Also, Cinderella has a blazing fast 40 time because at one point she beats a horse back to her house. Like, I don't remember the context of this, but she's out somewhere.
Yeah, and she has to
somebody's
race back. It's when Gustav tells Henry that she's staying with Radmilla.
Yes.
And she has to like race back.
She has to race back. Yeah, that's right. She's hiding behind the hay bale.
Which I guess the idea is supposed to be that he's taking the road and she takes a back route.
Right, but still. he's galloping on a horse and she's just running.
And not only does she beat him there, she has time to get changed.
Completely changed, do her hair and everything.
Look like
yeah.
nobility.
Yeah. Yeah, I thought that was funny. There's also a little detail that I really enjoyed, which it could be that they just filmed this in a real place that has these still. Because I know they filmed a lot of this, or maybe not the interior sets, but a lot of the exterior stuff was in like actual big, estates and whatever over in Europe. But there's a little scene where when they visit the monastery and they're looking at all the books, and this is like their fun date that spurs their whole relationship on. They visit this monastery with all these books, and the books in the monastery, a bunch of them have chains on them. And I was like, I've seen this because Game of Thrones did this too. And I looked it up. I was like, was this a thing? And it's a real thing, apparently. They used to chain books to the bookshelves in like certain places to keep people from stealing them, like particularly like valuable books.
Yeah.
They would just chain them to the bookshelf so you couldn't take it and leave with it, which I thought was cool. We also get in this movie, it has to be in every movie, the classic Drew Barrymore bottom lip bite. Did you know she does this in like every movie, everything? She's got it down. It's like the better version of the Lin-Manuel Miranda lip thing, lip bite. She does like a good version of it. She does this bottom lip bite when she's like into somebody, and she does it at one point in this movie, and it's
I feel like that's what Stephenie Meyer was envisioning when she was writing Bella.
Yes,
the Drew Barrymore lip bite.
Yeah.
I love the dress reveal in this movie. I like the fact that we don't see the full look until she's at the ball. And then we like see her from behind first.
I think
and
seeing her from behind first
around,
is a good, yeah.
And we see like the full regalia.
Yeah, it's a big fun moment. And it is interesting too to me that they then take that moment and it feels like this is the big moment, and then he rejects her. Like there's a building of expectation there that the movie pulls the rug out from under, which I thought was interesting. Maybe not super satisfying, but it's at least interesting because this is like the scene that, again, I had never seen this movie, but I had seen pictures at least of this scene. Like this is
yeah. I mean, it's the Cinderella moment. Yeah, right. In her glorious gown.
Exactly. And then to take that moment and immediately just like, never mind. He rejects her and she storms out.
She doesn't even get to dance.
Yeah, she doesn't even get to dance or anything. It's so short lived. I thought was very interesting. Also, she has so much glitter on her face. There's so much glitter. I was amazed at how much glitter was on her face. It's like you'd be getting that off for the rest of your life.
So at the end, when Radmilla and her daughters show up to the court and they kind of get the rug pulled out from under them, I kind of love the idea that Jacqueline knows what's going to happen.
Oh, she knows the whole time.
And just like cheerfully accompanies her family to what might very well be their doom.
Yeah. She's an interesting character.
Yeah,
I like her
is.
character a lot in this movie. I don't know. She's very interesting. She's written very like, she doesn't have a lot of lines, but yeah, she's kind of coy the whole time, and she has a lot going on that's all just kind of in the background.
Yeah,
that feels like she's almost like a more interesting character than even like Cinderella, but it's all just happening in the background. Like we don't get to really see everything that's going on. But I liked her character a lot.
I also think it's mildly hilarious that this movie is forced to acknowledge that France no longer has a royal family.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the French Revolution. Yeah. That whole thing. That at the end, like that hung in the university until that thing happened, and until the freaking French Revolution happened. We don't talk about that around here. Yeah. They have a amazing helicopter shot at the end of this movie. I was crazy impressed that there was this one shot, which is funny. this shot looks great. There's actually a handful of shots in this movie throughout that are like out of focus. I don't know
Yeah.
if you noticed that.
I did not.
I was
no.
like, there's like a couple shots where characters are like, one in particular, I think of the king like having a conversation with Henry or something. Maybe I don't remember the exact context, where it's just a close up of a guy talking, and it is entirely out of focus, like in a way that seems. It made me actually wonder if maybe our internet stuttered for a second and like the streaming bit rate got low and it like just looked a little blurry, and it was actually. I don't think it was, because I think it was just that shot. Because if it was the exact length of that shot of the guy, which seems unlikely. But I was like, that is a completely out of focus shot in this movie. Huh, weird. But I mean, it's not a common occurrence, but it happened a couple times and I noticed it. But anyways, that helicopter shot at the very end when the Brothers Grimm are riding out of her estate or whatever is super cool. I don't know. And I guess it's just a really long zoom lens because it doesn't look like the helicopter. It would have to be a helicopter. It was way before drones were a thing. But whatever, because they're like right over the top of that carriage in the courtyard, and then it pulls back, and we've eventually revealed a big wide shot of the castle and everything as the carriage is riding away. And the thing that impressed me was that with how seemingly close we weren't getting any sort of, at least not that I could notice, like disturbance from the helicopter. Like, because so it must have just been a zoom lens and there's some fancy camera work going. I don't know. Just really cool shot. I just was very impressed by the big final shot of the film. Apart from that, there's not a lot of like, it's not like the most visually stunning film ever, but that shot was cool.
So this is just a random thing that I started thinking about while I was doing like notes and stuff for this. And it's something that I've never looked into before, but I started to wonder where the ugly stepsister thing actually comes from and how old that is. Because in the Grimms, it says that the stepsisters are beautiful but with black hearts, while Perrault describes them as proud and haughty, which I guess isn't necessarily calling them beautiful, but it's not calling them ugly either. And like, Perrault does stipulate that Cinderella is far lovelier, but he doesn't call them physically ugly. I'm wondering,
it's just the Disney version.
Maybe it's
right?
just the Disney
aren't they
version.
like kind of like
they're
like they're not like
homely in the Disney version.
They're like overly like
cartoonish.
like,
they're far more cartoony looking. Than Cinderella is. They're not like the typical Disney like little button nose.
That's what I mean. Like to the point where they're what Disney does like when they do ugly people is and so it's Disney. That's where would be my guess of where that comes from. Yeah. Maybe not. I don't know. But
I don't know. It is interesting because I feel like there was at some point like a flip.
Yeah.
Like from like, oh, they're beautiful, but they're ugly on the inside to like, nah, they're just ugly.
Yeah. And then I think it flipped back because like in this one.
They're both very normal looking.
Yeah, very, very pretty. Just women. So I don't know. Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where it comes from. Interesting. All right. Before we get to the final verdict, we wanted to remind you all that you can do us a giant favor by heading over to patreon.com/thisfilmislit. Support us there for $2, $5, or $15 a month. At the $5 and up level, you get access to bonus content like we mentioned at the beginning. Most recently, we did discussed Moulin Rouge. If you want to hear our thoughts on Moulin Rouge, we talked about that about a week ago. You can go check that out. And then at the end of this month, we'll be discussing the 1997 Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella with Brandy. It's our bonus episode for this month, breaking that down so you get access to that. And yeah, you can do all that over on Patreon. You can also follow us on social media on Facebook, Twitter, Instagram, and Goodreads. It's where we did our March Madness bracket for Cinderella. So if you didn't get to vote, we'll be doing it again next year, probably. We're already the plans are already in the works for another March Madness bracket for a different movie/story at that time. So you can also vote which one we do for that although the poll might be closed.
Yeah,
we had a poll on Patreon.
Closed on Patreon.
We had a poll on Patreon kind of having people vote for which one they wanted us to do next year, but that poll's over. So anyways, if you follow us on social media, you can vote and all that kind of stuff. You can also comment and send us messages about what you thought of Cinderella of Ever After, and we'll talk about that in our next prequel episode, which comes out in 1 week. And I think that's everything. Katie, time for the final verdict.
Now, are you ready for your sentence?
Sentence? But there must be a verdict first.
Sentence first. verdict afterward.
I'm going to reiterate some of my final verdict from our Tangled episode because I have a lot of similar feelings here. It's tricky for me because I do have a knee-jerk gut reaction to go with the fairy tale because that's just my jam, and I want it to be everyone else's jam too because it's a great jam. But part of what I love about fairy tales is that each reimagining of the same story is like a little time capsule of the era and the place in which it was made. And I think that Ever After actually does that really well while still maintaining a story that honors its predecessors. Overall, I think it's a creative take that sets out to make the fairy tale quote unquote real and succeeds at that. Is it historically accurate? Probably not. Is it fun and delightful? Yes. Yes, it is. I think this adaptation is unique in that it manages to update its heroine to someone who's witty and independent without falling into either insufferable girl boss or not like other girls territory. And a heroine who's also at this point more relatable and understandable to modern audiences than older variations are. I also think that this movie's decision to give some focus to how complicated and fraught Cinderella's relationship with her stepfamily absolutely would have been was the right decision. So I'm going to give this one to the movie, with the usual fairy tale adaptation caveat that the folklore is still worth your time. It had been a long time since I'd seen this or read any version of Cinderella, and I had a lot of fun revisiting each and seeing the different ways in which the movie pulled from, paid homage to, and updated elements from each tale.
I agree. My big takeaway from this movie, again, kind of to reiterate just real quickly, is that I was kind of astonished by how I think timeless this movie is. Yeah. And there's definitely elements of it that date it to like the 90s in some of the like aesthetics, but not a lot, like not crazy. Like it's a pretty well, like the art direction, the costumes and everything feel timeless enough in the same way that something like Princess Bride does, where it's not like, oh, this is like Romeo plus Juliet. Well, to be fair, that was an updated, like the whatever. But it doesn't feel, like a Knight's Tale or something quite as like this is the late 90s, early 2000s as some of those other movies from the same time period. And I think the thing that it does most successfully, as you mentioned, is that it updates Cinderella in a way that feels progressive for a modern audience without leaning into like all of the... in a way that feels real. It also still feels realistic for even like the Renaissance period. Like it doesn't she doesn't feel completely out of place in the time period that the story is set. She doesn't feel out of time, but she works now and she worked then. And I haven't seen the 2021 Camila Cabello no, I've not either.
James Corden as a mouse adaptation, but it's my understanding that one of the biggest complaints about it was gaslight, gatekeep, girl boss Cinderella. Yeah, and I think this movie gives us that version, like a version of Cinderella that we actually want. That we want, yes. That is feminist. Yeah, I agree, and that seems like its biggest success because that is a fine line to ride, where you create a character who feels real and grounded, but is updated and, like you said, is a feminist character. This movie is not ignoring the hundreds of years worth of sort of feminist critique and lens through which fairy tales have been sort of looked at and reviewed over the decades. Yeah. The movie is aware of those things and updates it without it feeling like this, like pandering thing. Yeah, it's very interesting and very well handled, and I think it's why the movie is so good, which it is. I think it's a very well put together. And I was excited to watch this with you because I thought you might really like it. I liked it a bit. It did everything that I wanted a Cinderella story to do, and none of the things that I was worried it would do. Basically, I'm sure there's a couple things, but in general, it hit all the right notes for me. So I very much enjoyed it. Katie, what's next? Up next, we are talking about The Remains of the Day. Yes. A book by Kazuo Ishiguro. I'm going to have to look that up. Yeah, I don't know. 1993 film adaptation.
Yes, I Googled this film when I saw it in the notes, and I was like, oh, yeah, that's a movie that exists that I've heard of. Nominated for a bunch of Oscars. Don't think it won any. I've never seen it. I know nothing about it.
I don't know anything about it. It's a fairly slim book.
Yeah.
So I think if you wanted to read along with this one, if you don't normally read along, it's probably manageable.
Yeah. I read the one sentence synopsis or whatever on IMDb. Like, not even synopsis, like the thing under the title where it tells, it's like literally one sentence what this movie is about. And I was like, I had no idea that's what this movie was about. And it's vague enough that I still don't know what the movie's about. No, it's got Anthony Hopkins in it, but...
We're going to find out.
We're going to find out. I think it's Anthony Hopkins. I'm pretty sure.
Sounds right.
It's it's either him or that other guy who's like him. It is, I'm like 99% sure it's Anthony Hopkins. It is Anthony Hopkins and Emma Thompson and Christopher Reeve and Hugh Grant.
Okay.
Wow.
All right. I'm on board.
There you go.
That's a killer cast.
Heck of a cast. Those are our main four. So, yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what the hubbub is about. It's a very well-reviewed movie, again, for that I've heard of a lot of times, but just knew nothing about. So in 1 week's time, we'll be previewing The Remains of the Day, and we'll be hearing what you all had to say about Cinderella and Ever After. Can't wait for that. Until that time, guys, gals, non-binary pals, and everybody else,
keep reading books,
keep watching movies,
and keep being awesome.